The condemned world hung beneath a bruised sun, its continents veined with fire. From orbit, it looked serene, a sphere of amber clouds and gilded oceans. But beneath that fragile light, billions screamed prayers into the void, begging for a mercy that would never come. I was the answer to those prayers. My title was Executioner Primus of the Officio Exterminatus, an agent of the throne's most silent decree. When the High Lords signed the death of a world, I was the one who carried the pen, the sanction, and the flame. My voice was the final word in languages soon to be forgotten. And though I bore the sigil of the Aquila, there was no light in my heart. Only duty, carved into the soul like scripture upon stone. They never tell you what it feels like to end a planet. The sound isn't thunder or fire, but the shudder of silence. 1,000,000 lifetimes erased before your vox finishes the last syllable of confirmed. And in that silence, you hear them all. The soldiers who fought, the saints who burned, the heretics who laughed until the end. You hear yourself too. A whisper asking if obedience is worth the weight of ash. If the stories of those who serve the throne's darkest mandates compel you, if you've ever wondered what it means to live, breathe, and die in service to duty so absolute it consumes the soul, then walk beside me through this confession. Lend your faith to the channel, offer a light to the flame, and subscribe so the echoes of these forbidden histories do not vanish into the void. The message arrived without sound, without ceremony, carried upon a courier servo skull whose optics glowed the color of dying embers. It hovered before me in the sanctum of my vessel, the mercy of solitude, as if reluctant to deliver its burden. I had seen that color before, the hue reserved for only one kind of transmission. I dismissed the bridge attendants, sealed the chamber, and accepted the data slate. The skull retreated in silence, leaving me with the faint scent of ozone and the uneasy weight of inevitability. The sigil burned upon the slate's wax, twin-headed Aquila, embossed with the black ring of the Senatorum Imperialis. Beneath it, faint script shimmered, identifying the sender as the Officio Exterminatus, bearing the personal authorization of Lord Militant Orsinius Keld. My thumb hesitated over the seal. It is said that hesitation is heresy, but even the faithful sometimes pause before damnation. The lock clicked open. Light spilled across the table. The decree was brief, almost merciful in its efficiency. Planetary cleansing order confirmed. Designatus Gathis Prime. Reason, theological corruption, heretical governance, failure of tithes, confirmed Xenos influence. Level of sanction, Exterminatus. Executioner, Primus Varin Holt aboard the Mercy of Solitude. My name etched in gold beneath the words that would erase a world. It is strange how bureaucracy can be so coldly poetic. I had been trained to read such orders without emotion. We are taught that sentiment is corrosion, that the Emperor's will flows best through hollow channels. But the moment I saw that name, Gathis Prime, I felt something twist within the cage of my ribs. I remembered it faintly from my days in the Skolum, an agri-world once called the Green Saints Table. Its fields fed millions across the subsector, a world of harvest hymns and gentle devotion. Now, its faith had curdled into rebellion, and my signature would turn its oceans to glass. I rose from the desk and crossed to the viewport. Beyond the armored glass, the stars looked serene, indifferent, infinite. Somewhere out there, billions lived their final days unaware of me, of this ship, of the blade that hovered unseen above them. The silence pressed against my ears until I could hear the slow beat of my own pulse. It sounded like a countdown. The Vox grill on my desk crackled. Executioner Primus Holt, came the voice of Magister Ordo Servian, my superior within the Officio. His tone was ritual, heavy with the precision of doctrine. You have received the order? Yes, Magister. Then you know your purpose. You are the hand of the Emperor's justice, nothing more. There will be no deviation from protocol. The heresy upon Gathis Prime festers like rot in bone. We excise, we do not question. Do you understand? I understood. But understanding and acceptance are not the same. My tongue formed the required words nonetheless. By the throne's light, I obey. Good. His voice softened, though not with compassion, more like the weight of repetition. Begin preparations. The tech priests of Mars will sanctify the payloads within 12 standard hours. May your resolve be iron, Varenholt. The Vox clicked dead. The title lingered in the air like incense smoke. Iron resolve. The kind they expect from those who kill silently in the name of salvation. I exhaled, long and slow, and returned to my chair. The data slate still glowed upon the table, its letters pulsing faintly, as though alive. I thought of the people on that distant planet, priests, workers, children, all living beneath the same indifferent stars. I thought of their prayers, rising like smoke toward a god who would not answer. I wondered if the Emperor, entombed within his golden machinery, could still hear the voices of those about to die in his name, or if he too remained silent, drowning in the same eternal static that filled the void between worlds. Duty demanded that I begin the ritual sequence, but instead I sat there, hand trembling just above the activation rune. For a heartbeat, I felt the enormity of what was to come. An entire planet erased. Every mountain and memory turned to dust because of a decree I now carried. My role was not to question, but every human instinct in me screamed that something holy had been replaced by habit. In the stillness, the faintest whisper escaped my lips, unrecorded, unregistered, meant for no one but myself. Emperor, guide my hand, or forgive it. Outside the viewport, the stars remained mute. Only the steady hum of the ship answered, a low mechanical prayer that echoed through the metal bones of the mercy of solitude. I pressed the rune. The seal of the officio faded. The order was acknowledged. Somewhere deep in the vessel's data core, the countdown began. The command deck breathed with quiet industry, a cathedral of brass and lumen light, where every surface hummed with restrained violence. Servo arms swept in patient arcs above the hololith table, aligning tactical sigils that glowed like captured suns. I entered, boots echoing against the deck plating, and the murmurs of the crew subsided as though a ghost had walked among them. They knew what my presence meant, even without the official broadcast. Rumor moved faster than any vox. Exterminatus orders cast long shadows. I gave no speech. The bridge of an execution vessel does not thrive on inspiration. It thrives on obedience. A curt nod to the master helmsman, a single gesture to the Mechanicus overseer, and the ship began to pivot in the void. Gathis Prime would soon hang before us like prey beneath the talons of the Aquila. Through the forward viewport, the starfield twisted. I could almost feel the inertia of guilt pressing against my spine as the massive vessel reoriented toward the coordinates now etched into our destiny. Crew chants filled the silence, hymns to sanctify movement, the language of faith disguised as maintenance code. The rhythm was steady, mechanical, comfortingly inhuman. Beneath the decks, I could hear the distant clang of the torpedo priests beginning their preparations. Cyclonic warheads, each capable of vaporizing continents, were lowered from their cradles into purification bays. They would be bathed in sacred oils, etched with wards, and kissed by plasma fire before the machine spirits were awakened. The ritual was as ancient as the Imperium itself, part religion, part engineering, all inevitability. Magos Rector approached, his face a tangle of bronze implants and flickering sensor lenses. Executioner Primus, he rasped through his Vox grill. The payloads will be sanctified within 8 standard hours. All systems respond with 99.62% purity, a favorable omen. Even the last 38%? I asked without turning. He hesitated, the static of calculation whispering from his throat. Machine spirit variance. Acceptable by decree. Acceptable. A word that had killed more innocents than heresy ever had. When he departed, I remained alone by the viewing glass. Beyond it, the void rippled with faint aurorae from nearby solar storms. Each shimmer reminded me of flames spreading through atmosphere, of clouds igniting from orbital fire. My mind wandered to the first world I had executed, Sals VII, where I had watched the oceans boil from orbit until even the reflection of its sun was devoured by ash. I had been younger then, still naive enough to believe that righteous purpose could cleanse the horror of its methods. A low chime pulled me back. A servitor on spindled limbs offered a goblet of recaf, its pale flesh slick with oil. I dismissed it gently. The smell of recaf reminded me too much of command briefings, of the faces that once surrounded me before they too succumbed to obedience. I turned instead to my desk, retrieving the liturgical script of confirmation. Every planetary death required its proper words, formalities recited not for the living, but for the archives. My voice recorder flickered to life as I began the ritual preamble. Designation, Gathis Prime. Level, Exterminatus. Authorization Keld, Executor Varin Holt. Commencement pending verification of atmospheric stability and Mechanicus readiness. Emperor, watch and weigh this burden. The recorder blinked green, sealing my words into eternity. I deactivated it and allowed the silence to return. Through the deck plating, I felt the vibration of engines shifting to attack posture. We were moving closer to our mark, invisible amid the black. The ship itself seemed to breathe slower, as though it knew what it carried. There is a moment before every execution where time feels suspended, like the breath before a blade falls. We were there now, balanced on the edge between command and catastrophe. In the reflection of the glass, I caught my own face, eyes hollowed by years of sanctioned murder, skin pale under the lumen glare. The Aquila pin at my collar gleamed dully, two-headed and blind. I thought of those who had worn it before me, and whether any had died believing themselves pure. The comms officer's voice shattered my reverie. Approaching outer orbit of Gathis Prime, Executioner Primus. Awaiting your confirmation to enter geostationary lock. I looked once more at the data slate on my desk, its golden letters now cold. Lock the orbit, I said. My voice carried no tremor, though I felt the weight of every syllable sink into the steel beneath my feet. The engines roared, then quieted. Outside, a faint blue sphere drifted into view, a beautiful living world suspended in eternity's black sea. Clouds moved like pale ghosts across its surface. From this distance, you could almost believe it was peaceful. Almost. I let my hand rest against the glass, feeling the faint vibration of the ship's heart. Somewhere down there, people sang morning hymns to a god who would soon answer them in fire. The bridge awaited my next command. Instead, I whispered to no one. May the Emperor close his eyes before I open mine. The Chapel of the Mercy of Solitude was carved into the ship's spine, a vault of cold stone and metal, older than any of us. Its air was heavy with incense and engine smoke, a mingling of faith and machinery. Rows of flickering candles trembled before statues of the Emperor rendered in bronze, his gaze forever cast downward, as though disapproving of the creatures who dared worship him from the void. It was here that I came to kneel before the act of murder disguised as duty. I bowed my head beneath the carved Aquila, whispering the litany of necessary suffering. Each line was meant to strip away empathy, to remind the soul that pain was sanctified when wielded in his name. Mercy is weakness, doubt is decay, judgment is purity. To burn is to cleanse. The words tasted like ash, dry against my tongue, but ritual was armor. Without it, conscience became contagion. A priest servitor shuffled toward me, its voice box wheezing through the syllables of blessing. Its eyes were gone, replaced with twin lenses that glowed red beneath the hood. From its augmetic hands, it extended a data slate wrapped in a strip of parchment. Forgiveness preloaded, it croaked, for the Emperor's peace. I accepted the token and dismissed it. Forgiveness was rationed aboard this ship, dispensed like ammunition. No one ever had enough. Through the chapel's narrow viewport, I could see Gathis Prime below. The planet rotated slowly, its storm systems sprawling across oceans like white scars. Somewhere beneath those clouds, millions still lived. Farmers tending their final harvests, soldiers fortifying their doomed bastions, children whispering the catechisms they had been taught since birth. I wondered which of them had turned from faith first, and whether any of them even knew why judgment had been passed. A door hissed open behind me. Captain Elira Voss entered, her boots scraping across the ancient stone. She was a severe woman, once a void navigator before the Imperium had burned that gift from her mind. Primus Holt, she said, voice steady but low. The crew requests confirmation of the rite's commencement. The Mechanicus have finished sanctification of all payloads. Magos Rector reports the cyclonics are restless. Restless, I repeated, tasting the word. Machine spirits, impatient to kill. Tell him the spirits will feed soon enough. Begin final alignment of launch systems. Yes, Primus. She paused, studying me with the faintest trace of humanity that most officers aboard had long abandoned. Permission to speak freely? Granted. Does it ever become easier? Her tone carried no accusation, only the exhaustion of someone who had witnessed too many silent deaths. The first time I served aboard an exterminatus vessel, I thought it would break me. Now, I feel nothing, and I fear that more than the guilt. I turned toward her, and for a heartbeat, the air between us was heavy with shared silence. Feeling nothing, I said, is the only way we endure, but it is not the same as peace. She nodded, perhaps in understanding, perhaps in resignation. The Emperor protects, she whispered, though it sounded more like a plea than faith. When she left, I remained on my knees, The distant hum of the ship's reactor reverberated through the stone, a pulse that felt almost alive. The Mechanicus hymn began echoing from the lower decks, binary prayers woven through metallic choir voices. Each tone corresponded to a sequence, each chant a system awakening. Somewhere below, plasma coils ignited. The pyre was building. I rose, leaving the chapel's flickering light behind, and walked the long corridor toward the command sanctum. The walls were lined with engraved names, planets erased in the name of the throne: Carthax, Lumeris, Sal 7th, each one a requiem carved into steel. I traced my fingers over one of them and wondered if, somewhere, my own name might one day be engraved upon another wall, marked as both servant and sinner. As I entered the sanctum, the air thickened with ozone. The control dais stood at the center, surrounded by concentric rings of hololithic displays, each pulsed with data from Gathis Prime, atmospheric readings, population estimates, orbital trajectories, all of it cold, quantified, devoid of meaning. The bridge crew looked up briefly, then back to their tasks, none daring to meet my gaze for long. To look into the eyes of the executioner was to invite recognition of what we were complicit in. I placed my palm against the activation node. A blue rune flared beneath my skin. "Initiate pre-fire sequence," I said. "Authorization, Varenholt, level, Primus." The ship's systems responded with a low mechanical chant. Cylinders of adamantium began to rotate deep within the launch bay. Gears interlocked, seals disengaged, and the deck plates thrummed with awakening fury. The void outside seemed to darken, as though recoiling from what we were about to do. A final confirmation sigil appeared before me, awaiting Executor's sanctification. My thumb hovered over the rune. The ritual required that I speak the final benediction aloud, the words that made destruction holy. But I hesitated once more, just long enough to feel the human pulse beneath the machine. Then, softly, I whispered the phrase that had ended countless worlds. "By his light, let darkness be undone." The rune flashed white, the sequence locked. Deep in the vessel's heart, the cyclonics stirred, their machine spirits roaring to life like caged beasts finally unshackled. The air grew heavy with static. The hull groaned as if it too despised what was to come. And somewhere, beyond the reach of any mortal voice, the planet turned beneath us, unaware that its final dawn had already begun. The lower decks of the Mercy of Solitude thrummed with ritual purpose. Heat bled through the metal grating beneath my boots as I descended toward the torpedo sanctum, where the Mechanicus conducted their most sacred preparations. Here, the line between faith and machinery blurred entirely. Red-robed tech priests moved like shadows in a storm of incense and sparks, their binary hymns echoing off walls thick with condensation and the scent of burning oils. At the chamber's heart, the cyclonic torpedoes rested in their cradles, colossal things of steel and sanctified circuitry. Each was a cathedral of annihilation, capable of boiling oceans and cracking continents. The Mechanicus treated them not as weapons but as divine relics. One by one, they traced electroglyphs across their surfaces, murmuring blessings in a tongue no longer human. Magos Rector oversaw the right, his silhouette shrouded in vapor. Servo arms extended from his spine, anointing each warhead with promethium-laced oil that hissed upon contact with cold metal. When he saw me approach, his augmetic eyes flickered like dying lanterns. "Executioner Primus Holt," he rasped, voice resonating through a metallic grill. The spirits stir restlessly. They sense the judgment to come. I nodded, stepping closer to the first torpedo. The sigils carved into its hull glowed faintly, reacting to my proximity. "They always do, Magos. They were made for death. It is their only song." "Indeed," he said, and his tone carried reverence, not sorrow. "It is the most perfect hymn. Destruction in the Emperor's name is purity manifest." I ran a gloved hand across the weapon's surface, feeling the faint hum of its dormant reactor. "And yet," I murmured, "even purity leaves ash." Rector tilted his head, the metal creaking. "Ash is proof of faith's completion." Then, lowering his tone to a conspiratorial hum, he added, "But tell me, Executioner, when your task is done, do you ever hear them?" "Hear whom?" "The worlds you unmake," his voice hissed like leaking steam. The machine spirits whisper of echoes, lingering vibrations in the void. I have studied them. Every exterminatus leaves behind a pattern in the Imperium, a ghost song, Some say it is the Emperor himself taking note. Others say it is the screams of the damned. I met his gaze, or what passed for it. You should be careful with such speculation, Magos. Even your faith has limits. He chuckled, the sound like static through broken circuitry. Faith has no limits, Primus, only consequences. As I turned to leave, the hymns swelled. The tech priests raised their hands, and streams of white flame cascaded from censers, bathing the torpedoes in holy fire. The air grew thick, shimmering with heat and devotion. For a moment, it felt as if the weapons themselves were breathing, alive, impatient, yearning for release. I left the sanctum and entered the observation gantry above the preparation decks. From here, the machinery stretched like the innards of a god. Conduits pulsing with blue light, servitors scuttling across rails to deliver sacred data slates, and the ever-present hum of the ship's reactor core far below. Each vibration reverberated through my bones, reminding me that the mercy of solitude was less a vessel and more a living shrine, built for one purpose, to deliver judgment. A junior officer approached, hesitating at the threshold. Primus Holt, sir. The crew requests final confirmation of alignment data. And the chaplains? They await your presence in the wardroom for the blessing of flame, I sighed. The blessing was an old ritual, a relic of the earliest exterminations, when commanders needed to convince their souls that mass murder was holy. Yet tradition was armor. Without it, the mind unraveled. Tell them I'll attend shortly, I said. Ensure the data paths remain sealed until my return. He saluted and hurried away, boots clanging against the deck. For a moment, I lingered, staring down at the cyclonics far below. The light from their runes painted the air in shifting shades of red and gold, like stained glass in motion, beautiful in a way, terrifying in every other. I closed my eyes and listened. Beneath the hum of machines, I thought I heard it, a faint rhythm, like the slow heartbeat of the world below us. Gathis Prime, alive, waiting, soon, I whispered. Forgive me. The ship shuddered as though in answer. The wardroom had been transformed into a sanctum. Once it had served as a mess hall for officers, filled with the low murmur of routine meals and recycled air. Now its walls were draped in crimson cloth bearing the sigil of the Aquila, and a single reliquary stood upon the central table. Within it burned a flickering flame, the Ignis Absolutio, the holy fire carried aboard every vessel of the exterminator's fleet. It was said that this flame had been lit upon Terra itself, drawn from the pyres that consumed the heretics of the Horus heresy. Whether that was truth or myth mattered little. On this ship, it was law. The chaplain, an old man with augmetic lungs that hissed with every breath, stood at the reliquary's side. His armor was black and worn, the paint eaten away by centuries of devotion. Brothers and sisters of judgment, he intoned, his voice distorted by the Vox mask. The hour draws near. Our Emperor commands the purification of Gathis Prime. The sin of heresy demands cleansing, and we are his instruments. The crew knelt, heads bowed. Even the Mechanicus adepts paused in their mechanical murmuring to incline their heads. I stood at the front, my hands clasped behind my back. Ritual demanded presence, not humility. The chaplain's gaze fell upon me, the glint of his bionic eye catching the firelight. Executioner Primus Holt, he said. Speak the creed. I hesitated for half a breath, then recited, voice steady. Where faith has failed, we bring flame. Where devotion has waned, we bring silence. By the Emperor's will, we cleanse the unclean. And by his light, we turn the dark to ash. The chaplain nodded, his augmetic fingers tracing the sign of the Aquila over the reliquary. So it is written, so it shall be done. He withdrew a small dagger from his belt, a relic blade of dull bronze, and nicked the tip of his finger. A single drop of blood hissed as it touched the flame. For the cost of life, the Emperor grants us purpose, he whispered. And for our obedience, he grants forgiveness. Each officer in turn followed suit, pricking their fingers and letting their blood fall into the flame. When it came to me, I took the blade in silence. The steel was cold. I pressed it against my thumb and watched the drop of red sizzle and vanish in the holy fire. The smell of iron mingled with incense, sharp and human amid the sterile air. Forgiveness granted, the chaplain said. Judgment sanctified. The ceremony ended, and the crew dispersed, whispering prayers as they went. I lingered behind. The flame guttered low now, its color deepening to amber. The chaplain turned to me once more. "You carry the heaviest burden, my son," he said, voice soft and gravelled. "To end a world is to die a little with it." "I have no right to die," I answered. "Not yet." He regarded me for a long moment, as if searching for something within my eyes. Then he nodded, slow and sad. "Then live with what must be done. That is the harder penance." When I left the wardroom, the corridors seemed quieter than before. Even the hum of the reactors felt subdued, as though the ship itself were listening. I made my way to my quarters, small, austere, lined with data slates and relics of the worlds I had condemned. A fragment of scorched glass from Saal 7, a prayer bead recovered from Carthax, each one a souvenir of damnation. I sat at my desk and opened the holodisplay. Images of Gathis Prime filled the space before me. Cities sprawling across green plains, orbital stations glittering like shards of light, mountain fortresses carved into stone. At the center of it all, the grand basilica of the planet's capital, a towering spire crowned with a massive aquila, its wings spread over the city like a benediction. Heretics, the report said. Idolaters, apostates. I zoomed in closer to the streets below. Civilians moved among market stalls. Children chased each other through dust and sunlight. The data feed was only a few weeks old. They had no idea what was coming. My fingers hovered above the screen, tracing the outline of the aquila on the basilica's roof. For a moment, I wondered if they still prayed inside, and if so, to whom? The chime of the ship's chronometer broke the spell. Time was moving forward. Ritual was done. Duty remained. I deactivated the display, and the light vanished, leaving only my reflection in the black glass. "Preparation complete," I said to the empty room. The words tasted like ash. Hours passed like years aboard the Mercy of Solitude. The hum of the engines deepened to a low, throbbing pulse as the ship entered final orbit above Gathis Prime. Every deck was alive with purpose. Servitors chanting Binharic hymns, crewmen performing silent rites of calibration, the air thick with the mingled scents of machine oil and sanctified incense. The void outside was a mirror of stillness, the kind that precedes the storm. From the command dais, I watched the tactical display flicker with the planet's contours, oceans of turquoise and deep green, continents veined with rivers of light. The capital sprawl shone brightest, its energy grid pulsing like the heartbeat of some vast, doomed creature. Even from here, it looked alive. Too alive, I thought. Captain Voss approached, her steps deliberate, face composed in a soldier's neutrality. "All decks report readiness," she said. "Cyclonics armed and aligned. Launch synchronization complete. Awaiting your confirmation, Primus." Confirmed. The single word hung between us like a blade. She hesitated, perhaps hoping I would say more. Some reassurance. Some shred of the man I might have been once. But the time for hesitation had passed. Duty had consumed everything else. I descended from the dais and made my way toward the observation deck. Protocol demanded presence during alignment, though the machine spirits required no human eyes to function. Yet each executioner must witness the beginning of their work. It was the Imperium's unspoken command. To see what you destroy, to remember it even as it vanishes. The chamber was vast and dark, the only light spilling from the planet below. It filled the viewport entirely, a swirling marble of beauty and defiance. I stood in silence, listening to the whisper of the air recyclers, the muted clicks of distant relays. Every sound felt amplified in that stillness, every breath a confession. A flicker of movement in the reflection caught my eye. Magos Rector had joined me, his skeletal form framed in the doorway. "Primus, halt," he intoned. "The Cyclonics are restless. Their machine spirits hum at frequencies beyond standard tolerance. It is curious." Curious? He shuffled closer, servo arms twitching with faint metallic agitation. "It is as though they anticipate release. They know." I turned back to the planet. "Perhaps they understand their purpose better than we do." The Magos inclined his head. "Purpose is clarity. Flesh resists clarity. That is why it suffers. Then perhaps suffering is the last proof that we remain human." Rector said nothing more. His sensor lenses dimmed in contemplation before he withdrew, leaving only the low hum of machinery behind. I remained, eyes fixed upon the storm fronts moving across Gathis Prime's equator. Lightning forked through the clouds, the flicker of nature's fury reflected in my own armor. Through the Vox, I heard the distant cadence of the bridge crew reciting the countdown. Each number struck like a tolling bell. 60, 59, 58. I whispered a prayer, not to absolve, but to remember. May those below find peace in the Emperor's silence. May their souls reach his light before the fire does. At 30, the torpedo decks rumbled. Even through the bulkheads, the vibration reached my bones. The air grew heavier, charged with static. Every lumen flickered, shadows stretching like the hands of the condemned. At 15, the planet filled the viewport entirely. Clouds parted as if to bare its face to me. I thought of the reports, the heretical songs, the defiance, the rumors of Xenos idols carved into cathedral walls. Were they true? Did it matter? The Imperium did not require proof, only obedience. At 5, I raised my head. The ship's machine voice spoke through the Vox, hollow and divine. Cyclonic payloads aligned. Awaiting executor's sanction. I breathed once, twice, feeling my heart echo the count. My hand hovered above the final rune. Captain Voss's voice whispered through the comm. Quiet, almost reverent. Primus, the crew awaits your command. I pressed my palm against the control sigil. The rune flared gold, bathing the deck in cold light. By the throne's decree, I said. Commence ignition sequence. The ship roared to life. Gears screamed in unison, ancient engines awakening to fulfill their purpose. From the lower decks came the rising chant of the Mechanicus choir, their voices merging with the ship's own metal hymn. The torpedoes detached from their bays, drifting for an instant like angels suspended in prayer before falling toward the world below. In that moment, the mercy of solitude felt alive, a creature exhaling its first and final breath, and beneath it, Gathis Prime awaited judgment. The first signal came through the static, a faint, broken whisper buried beneath the thunder of comm interference. At first, I thought it was nothing more than atmospheric distortion, the dying breath of a planet already half condemned. But as the Vox operators tuned the frequency, words began to emerge. Human words, cracked, frantic, soaked in desperation. To any Imperial vessel. Please, we are loyal. The banners still fly. The heretics have been purged. The message dissolved into white noise, then reformed with another voice, higher, trembling, like a prayer slipping through tears. We hear the hymns of fire in the sky. If you serve him on terror, hear us. We beg mercy. We have rebuilt the shrines. We are faithful. I felt the air tighten in the command sanctum. The crew exchanged glances but did not speak. No one ever spoke when the condemned world began to plead. It was an old superstition that to answer was to share their fate. Record all transmissions, I said. My voice sounded distant, as if spoken through glass. Archive them in the exterminatus log. Captain Voss turned her gaze toward me, her expression unreadable. Sir, the Vox arrays are receiving multiple channels now. Civilian, ecclesiarchal, even military distress frequencies. The planet knows we're here. Let them speak, I replied. The record must be complete. Across the deck, the Vox scribes worked feverishly, data slates clattering as they transcribed the flood of messages. Pleas from planetary governors, invocations from priests, final orders from generals trying to hold imaginary front lines. Each voice different, yet all carried the same undertone, the raw, unfiltered terror of the damned. One voice rose above the others, cutting clean through the interference. A man, older, his tone calm but hollow. To the executioner who watches us, he said, you who carry the Emperor's justice know that we die with his name on our lips. Whatever our sins, we die as his children. If you hear this, remember us. A silence followed. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. I turned toward the viewport. Gathis Prime rotated beneath us, its atmosphere glinting in the light of its sun. The torpedoes had not yet reached descent range, but their paths were already locked. There would be no reversal, no appeal. The Vox crackled again. This time, the voice was female, weary, fervent, and burning with conviction. We have seen the Emperor's angels. They descend from the heavens, wings aflame, eyes like suns. They will cleanse us. We are ready. The bridge murmured softly, a ripple of discomfort moving through even the most disciplined of the crew. I knew why. The mind tries to build meaning from its end. Faith becomes a comfort in annihilation. For some, acceptance is the last rebellion. Then through the static came something unexpected, a voice unlike the rest. It was calm, deliberate, carried by the kind of certainty that turns faith into defiance. This is Preacher Malchior, once of the Basilica Trium. To the one who bears the Emperor's fire, listen well. The Imperium forgets that salvation and slaughter sound the same when spoken by those who have lost everything. You think yourself a servant of his light, but what if the flame no longer burns for you? What if it never did? The bridge went utterly still. Even the Vox scribes froze, hands hovering above their consoles. I could feel every eye flicker toward me, waiting for my command to purge the transmission. Instead, I said, "Continue recording." The preacher's voice deepened, edged with the echo of Vox distortion. "If you destroy us, know this, you destroy believers. You burn faith itself, and when the Emperor's throne grows cold and the stars go dark, will you still call yourself righteous, or will you see what you've become?" The transmission cut abruptly. Static rushed in like a scream. Captain Voss turned toward me, her expression hard, but her voice careful. "Primus Holt, orders?" I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of that voice linger, coiling through the recesses of memory. The preacher's words were heresy, yet they struck deeper than any blasphemy I had ever heard. "Flag the recording," I said quietly. "Seal it for ecclesiarchal review after mission completion." She hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." The Vox fell silent again, save for the dull hum of background static. Somewhere beneath that sound, I could still hear faint echoes, cries, hymns, laughter, all blending into one indistinct roar of humanity. The voice of a world singing its final song before the fire. And for the first time in years, I couldn't tell if the sound comforted me or condemned me. The transmissions continued long into the ship's artificial night. What had begun as chaos, fragmented signals, screams swallowed by static, slowly became something else. A pattern. The desperate calls gave way to hymns. Entire congregations were broadcasting their prayers across every available frequency, their voices uniting as though they believed their faith itself could reach the stars. From the Vox pits below the bridge, hundreds of channels played at once. Some sang in harmony, others chanted in wild, broken ecstasy. The sound filled the command sanctum until it was almost unbearable, an ocean of devotion, grief, and madness. It was not noise, it was confession. I listened. I had to. By imperial law, every world sentenced to exterminatus must have its final transmissions recorded, catalogued, and preserved in the archives of terror, to remember what faith looks like when it dies. But duty alone didn't hold me there. I could have ordered the Vox scribes to mute the feed, to record in silence. Yet I did not. I stood by the viewport, eyes fixed on the planet below, and let their voices flood me like a tide. The skies burn with angels. "We are ready. Father of mankind, forgive our trespass, forgive our unbelief." The messages blurred together until they no longer sounded like words, just sound and sorrow and light. Somewhere deep inside, I felt something I hadn't in years. A pulse of human recognition, thin as the echo of a heartbeat in a tomb. "Primus," Captain Voss said quietly from behind me. "The crew requests permission to isolate channels. Some are struggling." "Struggling?" "They hear their own homeworlds in the voices, sir. Some of these accents..." She stopped, catching herself. "Emotion was a luxury we were not permitted. Morale may degrade if exposure continues. Then they'll endure," I said. My voice was sharper than I intended. I softened it after a moment. "Mute the lower decks. Leave the bridge feed open. We bear witness." She nodded and returned to her station. The Vox crackled again. A new message, this one clearer, stronger. The speaker was female, perhaps mid-30s, her tone formal but trembling. "To any Imperial vessel receiving this, I am Astoria Vale, planetary archivist of Gathis Prime. I speak now not as heretic, but as historian. If you are listening, please record what is lost." Her voice faltered, then steadied. "We are not without faith. The schism began when the Adeptus Mechanicus forbade worship outside the central basilica. The peasants rebelled, yes, but not against the Emperor, only against those who hoarded his light. If that is heresy, then all humanity is heretical." I felt the bridge crew shift uneasily. "None dared look at me," Vale continued, her voice cracking beneath the weight of the transmission. "I have sealed our archives. The histories of our saints, our hymns, our harvest rites. They will burn, but perhaps the void will remember. Whoever commands our death, please let the record show that we loved him, even when we feared him." Then silence, pure and absolute. The Vox scribe looked up from his console. "Transmission terminated, Primus. Source untraceable. Possibly self-terminated after sent." I exhaled slowly. "File it under Codex Sanctum. Priority preservation." The scribe blinked in confusion. "That classification is reserved for ecclesiarchal." "Do it," I said. The command left no room for question. He obeyed. The rest of the night passed in a blur of static. More voices came and went, soldiers swearing loyalty, children reciting catechisms, a mother whispering lullabies over the scream of collapsing infrastructure, a civilization pleading for its soul. At last, the feed began to fade. The Mechanicus confirmed that the planet's surface Vox relays were failing under atmospheric instability. Soon there would be only silence. I dismissed the bridge crew, one by one, until I stood alone in the sanctum. The data slate of recordings rested before me, glowing faintly. I reached for it, thumb hovering over the seal command, but hesitated. The preacher's words from earlier returned to me. You destroy believers. You burn faith itself. I pressed the seal anyway. The data locked with a soft chime. Duty completed. But as the lights dimmed for ship's rest cycle, I heard something through the still active Vox. A single whisper, faint and almost childlike. Do you hear us, Executioner? The sound was gone before I could answer. I stood in the dark for a long time, staring into the black glass of the viewport, and realized I no longer knew whether the voices came from below or from within. The silence that followed the last transmission was deeper than any void I had ever known. It was as if the planet itself had drawn a final breath and now held it, waiting for what must come. The bridge lights dimmed to their red operational glow. The Vox channels dropped one by one until only the hollow thrum of the ship's heart remained. I felt it through the soles of my boots, through my chest, a pulse steady and relentless, like judgment itself. In that hush, I realized how accustomed I had become to the sound of pleading. The quiet should have been peace, but it was worse, an emptiness that left too much room for thought. I turned from the viewport and faced the ranks of officers and adepts, all standing at rigid attention. Every eye avoided mine. They waited for the next command, terrified not of death, but of hesitation. Confirm surface status, I said. A Vox scribe's trembling voice answered. Atmospheric stability holding at 91%, Primus. Target coordinates confirmed. Orbital alignment optimal for full coverage. Final confirmation? Captain Voss stepped forward, chin high but eyes shadowed. All systems ready. Awaiting Executor's authorization for terminal sequence. Her words hung like frost. Somewhere behind her, I could still hear echoes of the recordings. The archivist's plea, the preacher's defiance, the child's whisper. They threaded through my mind like ghosts refusing to fade. The weight of protocol pressed down on me. It was not merely an order, it was liturgy. Every world must have its witness. Every act must be sanctified. Yet as I looked at the planet turning beneath us, I felt no sanctity, only the terrible intimacy of ending something that still breathed, still believed. I reached for the command slate. The gold seal of the Senatorum Imperialis glinted in the dim light, as though mocking me. I recited the words required of my station, the words that turn murder into salvation. By decree of the High Lords of Terra, and in the name of the undying Emperor, I, Varen Holt, Executioner Primus of the Officio Exterminatus, enact his judgment upon Gathis Prime. Let none who walk upon its soil escape his cleansing flame. The bridge officers echoed the final phrase. In his light, all shadows perish. I could feel the sound vibrating through the hull, the choir of obedience that made damnation sound like faith. The final command rune appeared on the hololith. My thumb rested over it. Beneath my glove, I felt the faint tremor of my own pulse, the last reminder that I was still human. For a moment, I saw faces in my mind, the soldiers on the surface, the archivist sealing her histories, the preacher shouting into the static, and then behind them all, the Emperor's visage, not radiant or divine, but silent. Watching. Execute, I said. The rune blazed white. The ship shuddered as the first of the cyclonic torpedoes ignited from their cradles, massive columns of light slicing into the void. They drifted for a moment, silent, graceful, before the thrusters fired, driving them toward the planet's surface with the inevitability of divine wrath. The bridge filled with the rising hymn of the Mechanicus choir, their voices modulated through Vox to sound more like engines than men. Payloads away, reported Voss, though her voice was barely audible over the hum. Descent trajectory stable. Impact in 48 seconds. I turned back to the viewport. The torpedoes were nothing more than streaks of fire now, thin lines carving through the darkness. Beneath them, Gathis Prime glowed like a jewel in the dark. I wondered if they could see it yet, the fire descending. Did they look up and mistake it for salvation? The seconds burned away. 30, 20, 15. The final prayers of a dying world filled my mind, not through the vox, but as memory, as guilt, as something I could no longer separate from the hum of the ship itself. When the torpedoes struck, there was no sound, only light. A bloom of white and gold devoured the hemisphere, spreading outward like the slow unfurling of wings. Clouds ignited, oceans flashed to steam, the crust itself split beneath the force. The sensors overloaded, the display went dark. Only the naked eye could witness what came next. The silent flowering of apocalypse. Captain Voss whispered, "Emperor, preserve us." No one else spoke. In the reflection of the viewport, I saw my own face bathed in the light of the dying world. For the briefest moment, it seemed beautiful, as if the planet were offering one last act of devotion, burning itself to prove its faith. Then the light dimmed, and all that remained was ash. I turned away. "Begin radiation analysis," I said softly. "Confirm extinction parameters." "Yes, Primus," came the reply. The bridge stirred back to motion, but I remained still, listening to the faint static that lingered through the vox. It shouldn't have been possible. All surface transmissions should have ended at impact. Yet through the crackle of interference, a single sound persisted, a hum, faint and rhythmic, like the last line of a hymn echoing through ruins. No one else seemed to hear it. I whispered to the empty air, "I hear you." The sound faded, swallowed by the void, and with it, whatever part of me still believed in absolution. The light had not yet faded when the tremors began to ripple through the hull. The mercy of solitude shuddered beneath the residual shockwaves of planetary death. Even from orbit we could feel it, the psychic echo of billions of lives extinguished in an instant. The air vibrated with something that was not sound, not energy, but memory. It passed through metal and flesh alike, and for a moment, every heart aboard the vessel seemed to falter in unison. The Mechanicus choir continued their chant, though some of their voices broke under the strain. Their hymn had become dissonant, a dirge forced through circuits and faith alike. I stood at the observation deck, eyes fixed on what remained of Gathis Prime. The world burned silently below, a wound upon the void. Oceans boiled into spirals of steam. Atmosphere bled away like vapor from a dying candle. The continents themselves fractured, glowing red along their seams until they resembled molten script written across a blackened page. Magos Rector joined me without sound, the faint click of his mechadendrites the only sign of life. His optical lenses adjusted, analyzing the ruin below. The cyclonic pattern exceeded predicted efficiency, he said, his voice crackling through vox distortion. Destruction is absolute, a pleasing outcome. I did not respond. His words barely reached me. Every time I blinked, I saw the afterimage of the explosion etched into the back of my eyelids, a circle of fire that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "Do you feel it, Primus Holt?" the Magos asked. The void sings. The residual energies create harmonic resonance across the ship's machine spirit. The Emperor's will manifests in pure waveform. I turned to him slowly. It's not his will that I hear. His lenses flickered, confused, or perhaps calculating. "Blasphemy detected." "Observation," I said flatly. "Nothing more." He tilted his head, as if weighing whether to report me. Then, deciding perhaps that even heresy had to rest beneath protocol, he withdrew. When I was alone again, I let the silence close around me. The world was gone. Not dying, not decaying, but gone. Even the light of its sun seemed dimmer now, as if ashamed to illuminate the grave it had warmed for millennia. The vox crackled. "Primus Holt," came Captain Voss's voice. "Radiation levels falling to nominal thresholds. Orbital decay of debris confirmed. Mechanicus reports full extermination metrics achieved." "Confirmed," I answered. My throat felt dry, my voice foreign. "Log completion under Sanctum Protocol. Seal all data archives and transfer copies to Terra relays." "Yes, Primus." Her tone was steady, but beneath it, I sensed something fragile. None of us were immune. Each execution chipped away at the soul until there was nothing left but the shape of obedience. When the channel closed, I remained by the viewport. The ship's systems dimmed to half-light as the reactor shifted into conservation mode. Without the bright hum of activity, the silence of the void became almost sentient, a pressure that filled the lungs like smoke. That was when I saw it. A flicker, deep within the dying planet's core, a shimmer of gold light, faint but deliberate. It pulsed once, then again, rhythmic as a heartbeat. For a moment, I thought it a sensor anomaly, a ghost in the machine. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. Something was moving beneath the planet's crust, as though the fire itself refused to die. I activated the magnification hololith. The image expanded, fractured tectonics, molten rivers, storms of debris, and within them, that same persistent glow. It rose like a slow exhalation, curling upward through the vaporized strata, until it took shape. A form, vague, massive, almost human. It lasted less than a second before the image burned out, static flared, and the viewport filters darkened to protect the eyes. When the distortion cleared, the glow was gone. Only darkness remained, and the charred remains of Gathis Prime drifted like ash. My hand trembled against the console. For the first time since my induction into the officio, I felt something unfamiliar crawl up the back of my spine. Fear, not of death, nor of failure, but of meaning. Had the Emperor seen, or had something else looked back at me through the dying fire? I shut down the display and sealed the data. No record of that light would remain in the logs. Some truths, I told myself, were not meant for the archives of men. And yet, as I turned from the viewport, the reflection in the glass lingered a heartbeat too long. A faint shimmer of gold traced the outline of my armor, fading only when I blinked. I left the chamber in silence, the echo of unseen wings following me into the dark. The bridge was silent save for the rhythmic hum of the ship's reactor core. In the aftermath of the planet's annihilation, even the air felt thinner, strained through the weight of what we had done. Every sound, the hiss of vents, the ticking of cooling metal, seemed amplified, like the ship itself was trying to remember how to breathe. Captain Voss stood beside me, her posture disciplined, but her face pale in the dim light. The glow from the dying planet still painted her armor in ghostly hues. "The readings are inconsistent," she said quietly. "Residual energy signatures persist beyond expected decay curves. The Mechanicus believe they may be machine spirit echoes." "Echoes don't bleed light," I murmured. "Sir." "Nothing." I turned from the viewport. "Purge all non-essential data from the surface scans. The Emperor's will is fulfilled. There is no need to study ash." She hesitated, the faintest flicker of disobedience in her eyes, then saluted. "As you command, Primus." When she left, the bridge felt cavernous again. The silence pressed against me until I could almost hear my pulse in it, slow and heavy. I knew what haunted the crew. I felt it too. The fire had ended, but something remained. A hum beneath thought, an awareness that had not been extinguished with the planet. I descended to the lower decks, drawn by instinct or perhaps guilt. The Mechanicus were still at work, their chants mechanical and precise. The air was hot, laced with promethium fumes and incense, a chemical prayer to the Emperor that clung to the lungs. Margos Rector awaited me near the torpedo cradles, his mechanical limbs folded like a spider at rest. "Primus halt," he intoned. "Destruction confirmed, but the void sings with anomaly. Define anomaly." He twitched. "Not radiation, not electromagnetic feedback. Something older, a resonance that should not exist. I have traced the pattern through the ship's systems. It is identical to the frequency emitted by the Astronomicon." That word froze the breath in my throat. The Astronomicon, the Emperor's psychic beacon, his divine light across the stars, could not be mimicked by mortal means. "You're mistaken," I said. "I do not make mistakes," Rector replied, his lenses flaring crimson. "The readings are faint but precise, a waveform identical in structure, though weaker. It emanated from the planet's core in the final seconds before total dissolution." The image of that golden light flashed behind my eyes. "And now?" "Gone," he said, as though it withdrew. Like a breath reclaimed, 1,000 explanations formed and died in my mind. System malfunction, sensor corruption, plasma interference. But none felt true. The more I tried to reason, the deeper the unease clawed into my chest. Rector tilted his head, regarding me with the cold curiosity of a scientist dissecting faith. "You saw it too, didn't you?" "I saw nothing," I lied. He lingered a moment, then turned back toward his adepts. "Denial is inefficient," he murmured, almost to himself. I left the sanctum before he could speak again. The corridors beyond were dimly lit, crew shadows flickering like ghosts as they moved through the ship's arteries. The aftershocks of extermination lingered even here. The faint smell of ozone, the vibration through the hull that never seemed to stop. My quarters awaited in near darkness. I removed my gloves, stared at my hands, pale, trembling, streaked faintly with golden dust. I rubbed at it, but it would not come off. The residue shimmered softly under the lumen light before fading, as if it sank beneath the skin. I sat at my desk, opened my log recorder, and began to speak. Not for the archives, but for myself. Exterminatus upon Gathis Prime complete. Planetary annihilation total. Yet anomalies persist. A light golden in nature witnessed at impact coordinates. Possible psychic manifestation. Unconfirmed. Recommend further. I stopped. The vox emitter across the room crackled to life on its own. No crew transmission preceded it. Only a faint voice distorted, whispering through static. Executioner. My hand froze above the console. Did you think the flame would not see you? The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Male, layered, as though many voices spoke through one. The room's temperature dropped. The lumen lights flickered. I rose slowly, every instinct torn between faith and fear. Identify yourself, static answered, followed by a low, mournful hum, the same tone I'd heard through the vox after the detonation. Then, faintly, laughter. Fire remembers its maker, the voice said. And judgment remembers its hand, the signal cut. The room went still. I stood motionless for a long time, the air thick with ozone and something far older. The ship groaned, deep and alive, and I felt the faintest tremor beneath my feet, as though the mercy of solitude itself had heard and understood. Then, for the first time since I had taken the mantle of executioner, I knelt, not to pray, but because I could no longer stand beneath the weight of what might be listening. Sleep did not come that cycle. I lay in my quarters as the hum of the reactor pulsed through the walls, the steady rhythm of the ship's ancient heart. The glow of the lumen strips flickered intermittently, throwing my shadow across the floor like the wing of some unseen thing. When I closed my eyes, I saw fire, not as destruction but as awareness. The voice that had whispered through the vox returned in dreams, repeating the same words. Fire remembers its maker. I rose before dawn cycle and returned to the observation deck. The stars had shifted. Where once Gathis Prime had glowed like a sapphire among the void, now only a faint cloud of debris remained, circling its dead sun like dust around a candle's wick. The sight should have been reassuring, proof of finality, of completion, but instead it felt unfinished, as if the universe itself hesitated to move on. Captain Voss found me there. Her armor was unfastened at the collar, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Primus," she said, voice soft. "The crew reports disturbances." "What kind of disturbances?" "Whispers mostly, through the vox channels. Some claim to hear voices, prayers, songs, even screams. The Mechanicus insists it's feedback from the cyclonic detonation, but..." She hesitated, as if afraid the words themselves might summon what she spoke of. "Some say the ship is haunted." I turned to face her fully. "This vessel is a consecrated instrument of the Emperor's judgment. It cannot be haunted. With respect, sir, you've heard the vox. You know it's not interference." Her courage in saying it struck me. Most would have swallowed the fear, buried it under recitations of faith. I admired her honesty and envied it. "Seal all vox channels not critical to navigation," I ordered. "Tell the crew to maintain silence. Fear is a contagion. We will not let it spread." She nodded, saluted, and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she paused. "Permission to speak freely, Primus." "Granted." Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw the reflection of the dying world still burning across her memory. "Do you ever wonder if he hears us? When we burn his worlds, when we kill in his name, do you think he's listening?" For a long moment, I said nothing. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship, constant and alive. "If he is," I said at last, "then I pray he never answers." She said nothing more, only bowed her head and left me alone with the stars. I watched the debris field slowly drift, illuminated by the dying light of its sun. Somewhere within it, fragments of what had been a civilization now floated in silence. Pieces of faith, bones of a prayer turned to ash. And yet, even across that infinite distance, I felt it again. A pulse. Soft, rhythmic. The same golden shimmer flickering among the debris. Faint but deliberate. It pulsed once, Twice. Then the vox came alive. Executioner. The voice was clearer now, resonant, layered with echoes that made it sound both human and more than human. It filled the chamber, vibrating through the glass, through my bones. "You burn in my name," it said, "and yet you wonder if I see you." My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed to sever the link, to call the Magos, to banish this heresy with ritual and fire. But I could not move. I was rooted in place, transfixed. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. "Who do you want me to be?" The voice carried no tone, no gender, only an impossible calm. "You light my stars with the blood of your kin. You make silence where there was song. Tell me, Executioner, do you believe this pleases your Emperor?" "This is trickery," I said, forcing the words past the tightness in my chest. Some echo of psychic residue. "You are nothing, and yet you answer me." The viewport darkened, the stars bleeding into gold light. For a moment I saw the shadow again. The same vague, colossal form that had risen from the burning planet. It loomed across the void, faceless, its outline shimmering like molten glass. "I do not judge you," the voice said. "You judge yourselves with every flame you kindle." The light intensified until the edges of the viewport glowed white. My knees buckled under the pressure. Every lumen in the chamber flared, then shattered, showering sparks across the floor. The ship screamed, not from damage, but as though its spirit itself had been pierced. Then, as suddenly as it came, the light was gone. The hum of the reactor steadied. The air smelled of ozone and burnt metal. "Primus halt," came Voss's voice over the vox, breathless. We saw it too. Every deck. The light. It filled the ship. I steadied myself against the console. "Damage report, none. But some of the crew are on their knees. They're saying it was the Emperor. Others say it was something else." "Seal the bridge," I said. "No transmissions. No speculation. I want silence." "Yes, Primus." The vox clicked off. I stood there for a long time, staring into the void where the light had been. My reflection stared back, but it was no longer familiar. The faint shimmer of gold still lingered across my armor, flickering like veins of fire beneath the surface. For the first time since I had taken the oath of the Executioner, I wondered if the Emperor's light and the fire of damnation were ever different things, or if we had mistaken one for the other since the dawn of the Imperium. And in that moment, I knew whatever had spoken was not done with me. The mercy of solitude drifted through the void like a corpse, still clinging to the echo of its heartbeat. Systems flickered between light and shadow. Hymns of the Mechanicus fell silent one by one, replaced by whispers that no vox record could track. Even the air had changed, thin, metallic, laced with the scent of burnt incense and fear. It had been 40 standard hours since the light consumed the ship. The crew moved like penitents now, their eyes hollow, their lips dry with prayer. Some refused to sleep, terrified of what they might see in dreams. Others claimed they no longer needed rest, that the Emperor's voice sustained them. But I saw the truth in their trembling hands. Whatever had touched us had not blessed us. It had marked us. I walked the length of the upper corridor alone. The lumen strips sputtered with every step, each flicker revealing the sigils carved into the walls, faith etched by desperate hands. Ave Imperator. Forgive the fire. We burn in your name. Captain Voss found me outside the chapel. Her armor was scorched. Her left pauldron cracked from the shock that had torn through the ship when the light appeared. She looked smaller now, though her voice remained steady. "Primus," she said, "you need to see this." She led me to the shrine deck. The great bronze statue of the Emperor, once proud and gleaming, now wept molten streaks down its face, as though the metal itself had been burned from within. At its feet, dozens of crew knelt in silence. They were whispering the same phrase over and over. "He sees us now." Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting gold like molten coins. "What are they saying?" I asked. "They started after the vision," Voss said. "They claim they saw him in the light, that he spoke through the fire. They believe we were chosen. Chosen for what? To bring the same judgment again. To keep burning." I felt the chill of that answer sink into my bones. "Madness, perhaps," she said, "but it spreads like faith." I stepped closer to the statue. The metal radiated heat, though no flame burned nearby. I could feel it pulsing faintly beneath my palm, rhythmic, alive. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard the whisper again, not through ears, but through marrow. "Fire remembers its maker." I pulled my hand away. "Seal this deck. Isolate them. No one enters without my authorization. And if they resist, then pray for them, I said. And for us. She gave a sharp nod and began issuing orders through her comlink. The murmured prayers behind us swelled into song, a low chant that filled the corridor with a sound like rising wind. I turned and left the shrine, descending into the ship's lower sanctum, the archive chamber, where every exterminatus decree was stored before transmission to Terra. The chamber was circular, lined with vaults that held the recorded histories of worlds that no longer existed. Each vault door bore a name carved in High Gothic: Carthax, Lumeris, Sal 7th, Gathis Prime. I approached the newest vault. Its seal shimmered faintly with residual energy from the transmission, but as I reached out to verify it, I froze. The seal was cracked. Inside the chamber, light leaked through the break, gold, faint, but alive. I keyed the lock override. The door slid open with a hiss. The data slate inside pulsed with a soft glow, its surface rippling like liquid glass. I lifted it, and the moment my hand touched the surface, the chamber filled with sound. Faint whispers at first, then voices. Familiar ones. "We are faithful. Forgive our trespass. Do you hear us, executioner?" I staggered back, the slate slipping from my hands. It didn't shatter when it hit the floor. It laughed, not loud, not cruel. Just a quiet, knowing sound that was more terrible than any scream. "Who are you?" I whispered. The light within the slate pulsed once, and then words appeared across its surface, written in lines of flame. "You remember us." I stumbled backward, heart pounding. The light flared brighter, filling the chamber until the vault walls glowed red. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes moving in it. Outlines of faces, hands reaching upward. The faint echo of prayer turned to accusation. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the light collapsed inward. The slate went dark. The silence returned. I stood there in the dim red glow, breathing hard. The vault seal reformed itself with a hiss, as though nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. The records of Gathis Prime were no longer just data. They were awake. For a long while I just stood there, staring at the sealed vault door and the faint warmth still lingering in the air. The hum of the ship returned, steady, untroubled, as if nothing had happened. I could almost pretend that nothing had. But when I turned away, the world tilted, barely perceptible, a whisper of imbalance through the grav plates, and I felt the mercy of solitude shiver like a living thing. The lift carried me upward through decks of flickering lumen light. Crewmen avoided my gaze. Some made the sign of the Aquila as I passed. I wondered whether they prayed for protection or forgiveness. Perhaps both. The scent of oil and ozone followed me into the bridge, where Captain Voss waited beside the hololith display. She looked worse than before. Eyes sunken, knuckles white around the rail. "We've completed the containment order, sir. The shrine deck is sealed, and the crew? Calmer, for now. But they keep repeating the same phrase. The Emperor is awake." Her words landed like stones. "That is not a sanctioned creed." "I know," she said. "But they believe they saw him in the light." She hesitated. "Some swear they still see it when they close their eyes." I almost told her I did too, that every time I blinked, a faint afterimage of gold bled through the dark. Instead, I said, "Keep them contained. No sermons, no gatherings. Faith spreads faster than plague." She nodded, but I saw the doubt behind her mask of obedience. "And you, Primus? Do you believe he spoke?" I wanted to lie, to crush the question beneath protocol, but the truth escaped before I could stop it. If that was the Emperor, then he does not speak as men imagine. His words burn. A silence followed, heavy as gravity. Voss lowered her gaze. "Then we are already Ash." She turned away before I could answer. When she was gone, I activated the bridge's private Vox link. The signal routed directly to the archives, to the sealed data slate of Gathis Prime. I had to know whether what I'd seen had followed me beyond the vault. Static filled the line. Then, faintly, breathing. "Executioner," it said. The same voice, calm, patient. "You remember?" "This cannot be," I whispered. "It is memory. You built it with every order you signed. I obeyed the throne. You obeyed fear." The words struck deeper than any accusation. I slammed the console, cutting the channel, but the static lingered. I could still hear it beneath the hum of the ship. Not noise, a heartbeat. The bridge lights dimmed again. Warning runes flickered across the displays. Power fluctuations, life support variants, navigation drift. But I knew the truth. The ship was not failing. It was listening. I left before anyone could see the tremor in my hands. The corridors felt narrower now, as if the walls were closing in. I found myself drawn back to the chapel, despite my own order of isolation. The door slid open without command. Inside, the crew who had refused to leave still knelt before the weeping statue. The molten streaks upon its face had cooled into veins of gold. They glowed faintly in the half-dark, pulsing to the rhythm that haunted the ship. A woman turned as I entered, one of the sergeants. Her eyes were completely golden. "He forgave us," she said softly. "He forgave you." "Stand down," I ordered. She smiled serene. "We are already standing in his light." The others began to rise. One by one they faced me, their faces peaceful, their skin faintly luminous. For a heartbeat, I thought they might fall upon me in madness, but they only watched, waiting. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "To remember." The woman's voice layered with others, overlapping until it became a single chorus. "To know that the fire loves what it destroys." The floor trembled. The statue's eyes blazed white, and a low hum rolled through the deck, the same sound that had filled the ship when Garthis Prime died. I stumbled backward as light poured from the cracks in the walls. It was not heat, not radiation. It was presence. I felt it move through me, filling every vein with molten weight. Images surged behind my eyes. The worlds I had condemned. The faces of those who begged. The flames that consumed them. But now the fire burned differently. It was not rage. It was recognition. The light dimmed. When it faded, the crew lay prostrate on the deck, unconscious but alive. The statue no longer wept. Its face was serene again. I fell to my knees, trembling. The voice that spoke next was not in my ears but in my thoughts, quiet as a breath. "You cannot unmake what you've done, Varin Holt, but you can carry it. That is absolution." Then the silence returned, vast and complete. When I rose, the chapel smelled of ash and oil and the faint sweetness of ozone after lightning. I looked at my hands. The gold shimmer was gone, replaced by scars, fine lines etched across my palms like script. I traced them with my fingers and realized they formed words. "Remember us." I left the chapel as the ship drifted deeper into the void. The engines whispered. Somewhere beyond the hull, the debris of Garthis Prime glowed faintly, as though the planet's last ember refused to die. And for the first time in my life, I prayed, not for forgiveness, not for mercy, but for the strength to remember every world I had burned. The void stretched infinite and silent before the mercy of solitude, a vast cathedral of black glass where stars flickered like dying candles. The ship moved slowly now, its once mighty engines reduced to a low meditative hum. No orders came from Terra, no signals left the vessel. It drifted between systems like a relic forgotten by both time and faith. It had been 19 solar days since the annihilation of Garthis Prime. The official records would tell of a successful exterminatus, clean, absolute beyond reproach. The data slates would show readings of total surface sterilization, compliant to every clause of the Senatorum Imperialis decree. By all metrics of the Imperium, it had been a triumph. But inside the mercy, there were whispers. The crew moved through the corridors as though walking through a tomb. The golden shimmer that once marked them had faded, but something lingered in their eyes. A quiet awareness, a reverence that no catechism could name. They still prayed, but not in the old words. Their hymns were soft, stripped of triumph. They did not ask for victory anymore. They asked to be seen. I kept mostly to the observation deck. Sleep eluded me. The stars no longer offered comfort, only the uneasy reflection of what I had become. Every time I looked out into the void, I saw not constellations but ruins, invisible trails of worlds I had erased. I realized, with a slow horror, that I had memorized the coordinates of every one of them, each one a scar upon the firmament. Captain Voss joined me on the 5th night. Her armor was gone now. She wore the plain robes of the penitent, sleeves rolled to reveal scars where augmetic connectors had been removed. She stood beside me for a long while, saying nothing. The hum of the ship filled the space between us like breath. Finally, she spoke. "We received a transmission," I turned. "From where?" "Unknown origin. It came through the long-range Vox, but not through any frequency on the Imperial registry." She hesitated. It spoke only once. Then it ended. What did it say? She met my eyes, and for the first time since the fire, I saw fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of understanding. It said, "The Emperor remembers." A tremor passed through the deck, so slight it could have been my imagination. The stars outside seemed to flicker, not dimming, but pulsing, as if the void itself were breathing. "Where is the message stored?" I asked. "In the primary relay." "But Primus," she paused. "It bears your command cipher." That was impossible. My cipher was secure, encoded through the Officio's highest sanctum. I moved past her, down the length of the deck to the central console. The data feed flickered to life under my hand. There it was, a single log entry, bearing my signature and time-stamped 12 hours into the future. The message was only 2 words. "We continue." The display went dark before I could react. For a moment, I thought it had shut down, but the shadows on the glass moved. Faint ripples, like heat distortion. Slowly, letters began to form again, glowing faintly gold. "Remember us." The same phrase etched into my palms. Behind me, Captain Voss whispered, "He's still here." "No," I said softly. "They are." She looked at me, confused, but I couldn't explain it. Not yet. The truth was only beginning to take shape in my mind, cold and certain. The light that had filled the ship, the voices, the visions, they were not miracles, nor curses. They were memory-given form. The fire had not erased them, it had preserved them. I realized then that Exterminatus was never truly destruction. It was transformation. A planet's soul, burned and scattered across the stars, became something else. And those of us who carried out the act became vessels for its echo. The Emperor did not merely command us to cleanse. He made us the keepers of what was lost. The mercy of solitude drifted on, carrying within it the ghosts of countless worlds. I wondered if that was the true meaning of our name. Not mercy in ending, but mercy in remembrance. I turned back to the viewport. The debris of Gathis Prime shimmered faintly, still illuminated by the remnants of the detonation. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement within the dust. Shapes, faint and fluid, rising like motes of light. Perhaps imagination, perhaps something more. Voss stepped closer. "What happens now?" she asked. I studied the drifting ash and thought of the words etched into my hands. "We carry them," I said. "That is our penance. Will the Imperium understand?" "No." I looked out into the dark. "But perhaps the Emperor does." She bowed her head, and for a long time we stood together in silence, watching the ruin of a world become part of the stars. Eventually, I dismissed her. When she was gone, I keyed the private channel one final time. The Vox crackled. No words came, only a faint hum, the pulse that had haunted me since the beginning. I closed my eyes and listened. It was not a threat, not judgment, just a sound like distant singing, a choir of memory. I thought of the millions who had died, of the fire that had consumed them, of the light that had filled our ship, and for the first time, I did not feel alone. The engines rumbled softly as I entered the final log of the Mercy of Solitude. I, Varin Holt, Executioner Primus of the Officio Exterminatus, record the completion of duty and the beginning of remembrance. Let the worlds we have burned find peace within us. Let the Emperor judge our silence. Let memory be the light that remains when faith has turned to ash, the record sealed. The ship continued its slow drift into the dark between stars, its path unmarked, its purpose unspoken. Somewhere, beyond the reach of any Vox, the faint shimmer of gold still pulsed within the wreckage of Gathis Prime, not fading, but waiting. And in that endless night, where even gods had grown silent, the executioner finally found absolution.